I speak to you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and in the name of Blessed Father, Saint Dominic. Amen. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to our third Sunday in the season of creation, our common humanity. I'm Rosie Castelli. I'm an Anglican Dominican sister, and it is my honor to worship here at SsAM every week. You know, it's daunting up here. I'm looking around for the teleprompters. They must be somewhere, or you have to run for president to get them. I don't know. Whatever, I hope you bear with me as we talk about our common humanity. To begin today, I have a little story to share with you. Having been in many parishes in my 73 years, I know that parishes like the ones in this fictitious scenario do exist. They're not at all like us here at SsAM. But see if you've ever seen or heard anything over the years like this in your own experience. I know I have, thank God not here in Wilmington. The story goes something like this. Once upon a time, and every story begins with once upon a time, in a parish far away, there were parishioners mulling and talking after the Eucharist. One thought to herself, that new parishioner over there really doesn't fit into our parish. She doesn't dress like us. She doesn't talk like us. She doesn't even pray like us. I'll just keep my distance and not say much to her as we go along. Another parishioner mumbled to himself, I really know what kind of people belong in my church. They're just like me. I know all my prayers and my hymns. I have my pew, which I sit in every week. I come early. I give plenty to the collection. I dress appropriately, and I sing loud. I do all the right things. I'll just keep this person at a distance and let her go her own way. And these parishioners went happily off to coffee hour each week, ignoring the new parishioner and feeling quite righteous in the eyes of God and justified in their exclusion of others. Boy, am I glad I go to SsAM. But, my friends, if we're honest, there are parishes, unfortunately, just like that, in all denominations, where people are just not welcomed for one reason or another. And what's really sad is that the parishioners feel quite justified because they feel that they know their church and they know who belongs. My brothers and sisters, that's exactly what our Pharisee in the gospel did as he entered the temple to pray. That's how he viewed the tax collector who stood in the corner, head bowed, just expressing his silent gratitude and humility before God. After all, the Pharisee thought he had a right to feel that way. After all, he was a member of the privileged class. He probably had worshiped in that temple all his life. He knew the law, and he knew how to worship. Tax collectors, on the other hand, were the scum of the earth to the Pharisees. Known as publicans, they were, notice I said publicans, not Republicans. Known as publicans, they worked for the Roman authorities, paid these authorities to collect taxes, and then were free to squeeze out of the people any amount of taxes they wished. And squeezed they did, charging exorbitant amounts to become rich themselves. Of course, this Pharisee thought he had a right to exclude from the kingdom the likes of a tax collector. And he would justify his belief by telling God what was good about himself. But our reading is quite clear, isn't it? It is the tax collector who is justified before God, not the Pharisee. And the question we ask is why? Why is that? The Pharisee in our passage was all about I. I fast twice a week. I pray at the appointed times. I give 1/10 of my income. I do all the right things, just like our parishioners in the story. What he lacked was humility and openness to all people, and what he had was contempt, open contempt for anyone who was different, anyone who deviated from the standard of righteousness at the time. This Sunday asks us to think about whether there are times when we are like that Pharisee, blind to our common humanity and what brings us together. Do we close doors on others because they don't live by our standards or are different from us in a variety of ways? Are we full of I, to the exclusion of others? After all, we say, we are doing all the right things. But, my friends, as you know, for Jesus, it has never been about the things we do. It has always been about attitudes of the heart behind the things we do. That attitude of the Pharisee is exactly what is rejected by Jesus in our parable today. The gospel, and indeed all of our readings this morning, point to the great reversal of values that being a Christian should bring to the world. The great reversal of values. Think of the reading we heard from Paradise Now. It asked, what do we want? And we read a complete reversal of how we live now. It urges us to consider feeding all people and reinventing love, ridding life of greed and values that don't support human life, changing our own attitudes about the disenfranchised and about our lopsided social systems. It asks us to reevaluate our systemic need for control and exclusion and the isms and phobias we secretly live by. What we see is that Jesus' standard is not ours, not the prevalent standard of the world today. His measure is based on humility, not self-righteousness. His measure is based on mercy, not on contempt for others. His measure is based on the dignity of every human person, not on artificial differences in how we look or what race or social class we are in. The readings are so clear and perfect for this season of creation and this Sunday in which we celebrate our commonality of humanity. As we follow in this season the key events of our creation story, with readings like the ones we heard today, we learn that our destiny as a Christian is to embrace all, to care for all, to welcome all, no matter who they are or how different they may be, and to work for social change, acceptance, and justice. The word I would use to kind of summarize all of this is the word inclusion. Inclusion. And I would add these adjectives: loving inclusion, not begrudging inclusion. Inclusion without measure, not inclusion just for certain groups. Authentic inclusion, inclusion that comes from the heart, not just out of convenience. As Mother Teresa suggests in our reading this morning, all people, whether they are Hindu, Muslim, or fellow Christians, they all deserve our love, a love that flows from our love of God and unites us to Him. Indeed, the entire Earth Charter requires that we respect and care for the entire community of life, of which humanity is the central part. So then, on this Sunday in the season of creation, let us ask ourselves some probing questions. How welcoming are we to the stranger among us? Do we recognize the common humanity of all? The first thing we must do is remember that Pharisee. The Pharisee's attitude of self-righteousness and contempt for others must be completely reversed. And we must look to the humble tax collector, even though we still hate what he does. The tax collector who found a sense of belonging and justification in God's sight. Belonging. That's one of my favorite words. I love it. It is so powerful and so important in creating a common humanity. Belonging means to know that we are part of something bigger than ourselves, something that helps define who we are and what we consider important. The tax collector belonged because humility brought him to God, and God's mercy filled his heart. He belonged to Christ because he, unlike the Pharisee, was humble enough to see that his life was dependent on God and God's grace in him. Belonging, to make someone a part of a bigger reality. It's what our readings ask of us today. As you leave SsAM this morning, I ask you also to consider these questions. How do we create a sense of acceptance and belonging for those in our church, in our homes, in our community? Do we shut people out of our lives through artificial or external barriers like the Pharisee did? How do we make a belonging culture? Finally, dear friends, the season of creation readings this week ask us to consider another word, another concept essential for building a common humanity, and the word is purpose. Purpose. Our lives get their meaning through the belief that what we do matters for us and for others. Jesus gave purpose to the men and women he met during his ministry by challenging their faith and then watching them go out and extol his name to others. Lepers, prostitutes, paralytics, the rich, the poor, All who needed healing were given purpose when Jesus touched their lives. Purpose helps us see that what we contribute makes a better world for all and unites us together. And I maintain that purpose is the glue of our common humanity. And so here's another question for you. What is your special purpose? How do you bring out in others their special purpose? These themes of belonging and purpose are our themes today, dear brothers and sisters, and they are the essence of our common humanity. Let us return for a moment to that parish far away. Imagine, if you will, what it would be like if the parishioners had said this. Who is that new person over there? Let's go greet her in the name of Christ. Let us show gratitude that she is here. Let's help her know that in this parish she can find purpose and meaning. Let us help her belong here. Just imagine how God's kingdom would come alive and reflect our common humanity. Just imagine. Amen. If you would take a few minutes now to consider the questions that I posed to you, and also look at your sheet that was given to you in your brochure this morning, and consider and reflect on our common humanity.